morning, Coach Robbie.
You all right over there?
Would you hear something?
Yeah, I think you're doing like a farmer's blow or something on the side.
What do they call it? The rockets?
The snot rocket, man.
Snot rocket.
Mike Tarrolly, welcome. Crushing Iron Podcast, brought to you by Snot Rocket, your favorite cold season expulsion. No, welcome. glad you're joining us. I hope you feel better, Mike. And Claritin. We should be sponsored by Claritin. I think we discussed this last year, but it's allergy season. It's sunny. It's cold. It's freezing. It's nice. It's warm. Everything's blooming and it's pretty. But good God, is it miserable?
Yeah, it's rough.
But it's rough. But yeah, thanks for joining us. Welcome. How was your weekend, Mike?
Crushing Iron Podcast number 255. That's a lot of podcasts, man.
Mm-hmm.
My weekend was enlightening.
Yeah, enlightening. Yeah,
I was gonna. It's funny because that was the question I was gonna ask. Hey, buddy, how was your weekend?
Yeah. You and I spent like 12. I mean, more than 12 hours together over the weekend. It's not like we don't see each other enough, but we spent 5 or 6 hours together, and then dinner with each other on Saturday, and then another 5 to 6 hours with each other yesterday, working on, I don't know what I would call a project.
Yeah, it's a project, self-exploration project, maybe.
Yeah,
and documentation project. As we go through life, we're trying to capture some of the things that we're learning. Because I've been thinking about that a lot. I mean, we went through a lot of deep thought this weekend, and how important it is to learn. You know, I think that ultimately, sometimes for me, life comes back to that. It's like, what can we learn? You know, that's sort of the motivator for me. I think that's something that you do.
God, do we? That's the only thing that we know, or that's the only thing that we should know, is that we have so much left to learn about everything. You know, in training, in life, in relationships. It's, you know, there's a lot of people that everyone knows that, you know, they know everything. But the only thing that we really know, or that we should know, is we're not in control, and good God, do we not know anything? I mean, if you could just sit here in the in the small environment that I'm in, I'm like, I have no idea how my computer even functions. I don't know how people talk to each other on the phone. I don't know how these signals work and these waves, and I don't even know how to build a couch. You know, but you're like, I know everything, but you don't know a lot of things, and I think it's good because learning and growing and finding things out about yourself is, again, like you said, I think we've mentioned this before in talking about triathlon, is that it's one of the greatest journeys of self-exploration that you can participate in.
Mm-hmm.
Because every day is a chance to get to know yourself better, and it might not necessarily be a good thing. You know, I say, like, you know, it's going to make you this thing, but sometimes you'll find out things like that you're like, this is probably going to give like some athletes like the hives. But I had an athlete a few weeks ago, because sometimes, like, so like when I set up Training Peaks, I had these weeks, and if they don't do workouts, you know, I will usually leave them there because I like to see what's missed. But if they didn't do a workout, I know we still need to hit this progression, because, you know, we always get stuck in progressions and timelines, and I have to be ready for this race. So even though if I didn't do his 10-mile run this weekend or the 12-mile next weekend, on schedule is a 16. So if I'm going to be ready, I better jump to the 16. But so this athlete, I moved 2 workouts from one week to the next because we needed to make sure we just kind of stayed with this progression. He was like, hey man, like, what, you know, where'd those workouts go? Did you delete them? You know, what happened? And of course, 99.9% of athletes would have been like, thank you for taking away my red. It, like, I break out in hives. I can't sleep. It makes me itch. I'm scratching at my neck. I can't sleep. It's like you have on like a brand new turtleneck that hasn't been washed. And I was like, yeah, I moved him to the next week, you know, just to make sure that we can hit those. And he was like, do you mind moving them back? I like to see the red. And I like to see the comments on the red to help me remember. And it wasn't it wasn't in the conversation of, I want to remember the failures or I want to remember the shortcomings, or I want to use that as like motivation to not to work harder. It was, I want to know, because what he had in there was late night at work, didn't prioritize my time very well, got home and just missed the opportunity. So it was nothing negative or huge or like I need to make up this epic run. It was like a Thursday.
It was like rational.
Yeah, it was rational. It was like, and so what he was doing was allowing and leaving those opportunities and those comments to stay there as like a journal to himself of, this is obviously something I need to work better on. So when we talk about self-exploration and growing and becoming fitter and finding out you can accomplish all these wonderful things, it can also be a reflection of, man, I really still suck at these things. I need to work on them. And if we use that, if we're open to looking at both sides of what can happen when we turn over all of the rocks and the stones of our life and think, well, they're not always going to be great. I don't always have to work on getting faster because that's good. Maybe it's also like I need to work on prioritizing my time well, or not making excuses, or maybe I need to get up earlier. Which is a huge one for a lot of athletes. Like sometimes I'll comment on their training peaks if it's in the morning. I'm like, whoa, up early to swim? And they're like, yeah, don't talk about it. I'm still in a bad mood. But I just think I think when we think and we talk self-exploration, it's always in finding these great, wonderful, uncovered characteristics that we had that we never knew. And a lot of it is just, reinforcing the good, reminding us of that we have things to work on, and then hopefully also uncovering things we can improve on. But training and racing allows us those opportunities and gives us those opportunities to give ourselves positive and constructive feedback to try and be better and grow the next day and to continue to learn.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really interesting. The idea of rational reflection on something like that because can we talk about, like emotionally, this sport can really push you, I think a lot of times, to highs and lows and everything like that. And it's very difficult to kind of just step back and look at things and say, okay, why am I so pissed off about something, or why am I so elated? And just to be able to kind of balance that out and look at things from a perspective of like, okay, what does this mean? And how can I maybe look at it differently and change it? And without judging it, because, man, I was just thinking, like, sometimes I'm such a baby about the way I look at my training. It's like I'm super tired, and if I push it and I know that I did too much that day, and then I get in a bad mood, and then I'm like, well, this whole thing is just what it's all about. It's all about kind of back to what I was saying about learning. It's like, how can you learn to do things that are better for yourself and not let the emotions get completely out of whack all the time. That's just such a big component of training for triathlon, because it almost accentuates, like if your life is one way and then all of a sudden you're going to just push the highs higher and the lows lower, kind of because of we talk about how it's hard to stay motivated without energy, and you're tricking yourself to do different things all the time. And it's like, that is really interesting to hear that he wants to look at the red for just to see it and decide from a grown-up perspective what that means.
It's so productive. It's like it's like, and just, we always like to like only make, see production from things that are positive and not, and not like all things that are good. There's just so much to gain from self-aware. I guess it's self-exploration by giving and allowing ourselves more opportunities for self-awareness, and everything in our life. And I think training really lends itself well to that. Like you said, the good and the bad and the structure of training as well, or the non-structure, in our ability to respond to who we really are, and then maybe let's formulate differently like how we calibrate our minds to specific sessions and workouts and approaches and races, or do we need to kind of be met in the middle, somewhere? And it's a interesting, like when he texted me that, I was like, whoa, who is this? Like, you're not real.
No kidding.
Nobody does this.
Let's go back to that a little bit, because as you said, I think that's a big challenge for a lot of people, is that when they do miss a certain key workout moving forward, and then you're on a schedule, is that your preference to kind of just slide things down rather than you missed a big workout and then all of a sudden you got a bigger one coming? Do you just, you know what I mean? Like if somebody's on their own plan or whatever, what would be the logical attempt at that? Maybe split the difference, or if you're going to, you know what I mean? If you can't necessarily quote unquote move things around, or whatever that would be. Because of course that happens all the time. I see it in the club. It's sort of like, hey, there was a 3-hour bike that just didn't happen, and then the next weekend is like 4 hours or something, whatever it may be. Do you just kind of keep plugging along? And
it is an absolutely like jam-packed, overflowing, loaded question in terms of but it's, I think one of the hard, and I'll just read this what I wrote the other day in a minute, but I think one of the hardest things for some athletes to understand, and maybe even some coaches to understand, is athlete A signs up for a race, and athlete B wants you to train them for that race. Your job is to train them with that race in mind. But that race doesn't give everything else, like it doesn't demand, and it doesn't have total autonomy and power over every next decision that's made. As a coach, I care about the races that you want to do because they matter to you. But they fall way down the list in terms of what's really important, and it's your healthy progression as an athlete, and not taking a shortcut or raising the level of risk or jumping way ahead just because. And I get in this, not an argument, but I have these conversations a lot with athletes, and sometimes it'll stem from like the distance versus time argument or clarification, but I haven't done this right. I'm like, well, show me what you've done that would allow us to both think objectively that you doing this ride or this run today would be a good idea for your health and your progression, and it is in fact the amount of stress that you can handle today by what you've shown me. And I think, and I'll just go and read this quote in terms of how you deal with progression, then we can kind of loop that back into missing workouts. And I said, I think something even the most experienced athletes fail to grasp sometimes is that coaching an athlete goes like this. Where their training has been is A. Where they are now is B. Where they have shown they can go next is C. And then the most underrated, neglected one is where they have shown they can repeatedly do and stay healthy is D. What you then decide to ask them to do next is E. So you take into account, as a coach, A plus B plus C plus D, and that's how you get D. E. And I mean, it shows you how my math is, but it equals E. But I think that's one of the, so athlete, so Mike triathlete comes to me and says, hey coach, hey man, all my friends are, signed up for a marathon. I think I'm gonna do it with them. It's in 6 months. You think I can be ready? Well, first of all, what's your definition of ready? Can we do it? Can we complete it? Sure. I mean, most people can just complete a marathon. Would you be racing it? No. Would it be your best marathon? Well, depending on how your previous training has been, maybe not. I mean, 6 months sounds to people like a long time, but it is not in terms of how long it takes people to get a proper progression and healthy running to be able to run fast into their potential. But you can get them there. And so you got two different athletes. You have an athlete who's following a training plan, maybe an athlete who has a coach, and then you who's maybe more wired to dictate their training to make sure that they get long runs that equal and that would say this person is ready. Or you have an athlete who is like, all right, well, I'm going to work you from where you are today, and we're going to work as best we can and be as consistent as we can and being healthy as we can to get you to race day as healthy and as happy and as prepared for this marathon as we possibly can based on what you do. So, example, my triathletes, all right, well, first week I got an hour and a half run, nail it. Next week, I'll just go with long runs here. First week, hour and 15-minute run, check. Next week, hour and a half run, check. Next week, out of town, oh man, missed it. Missed my hour and 45-minute run. Got busy. I can't fit into a week. Next week, hour and 45-minute run. I woke up, wasn't feeling well. I was only able to get an hour in. Next week pops up. What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Most athletes find themselves in this really tough position of, oh, crap, I've missed the last 2 weeks. Therefore, I have to jump ahead because I got to make up for it. That might make sense in your mind, but to your body, it's putting it in a very, very vulnerable and high-risk situation to then continue to follow the progression and say, okay, this week I missed the hour and 45, then I missed it again, and next week's 2 hours. Even the last run I did was an hour and a half, and that was 3 weeks ago. But by golly, I better do this 2 hour, 215-minute run because I'm 8 weeks out. I've got to do it. And then you ask them to go out for this 2 hour or 215-minute run, and they can't finish it. And then so you continue. Now you start to move backwards, because what happens is when you set up your body for failure, and you set up your body to have nothing more than a response of survival, and where it hasn't been able to accumulate a huge amount of stress, is it can no longer respond. And so when you ask it to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday sessions, it can't. So now you're behind again. And so that's where, as a coach, you have to say, I care more about your gradual progression of an hour and a half to an hour and 45 to 2 hours, and what you can actually handle, and what you've shown to me you can handle within your life constraints and with the amount of stress, and that your body can handle, and do it healthily and progress. But I'm not going to put you at risk for the sake of meeting your quota. And again, that goes back to like the things that you that you want to do as an athlete, or the predicaments people can come into if they're self-coached.
Yeah, I get it. And it's just a tough one, yeah, because I think obviously the answer there is probably just to be able to I think when I was saying, somewhere in the middle, or at least getting to where you're at again, and then kind of, you can kind of, if you're consistent, probably pick that stuff back up again. But there's no way going all the way after not being ready for it is the right solution there. It seems to me like that seems to me I would say that's probably one of the biggest problems in triathlon, because it's like we always talk about staying within yourself and being patient and consistent and everything like that, but that all of a sudden creates the opposite of all that stuff, and then it's a scramble, and then it becomes the race. Then the race takes over your mind, and then it's all about, I've always thought that, if you're doing something, like for example, you're going into your peak phase and you can't, and you, for some reason you just completely blow off or can't get done the biggest weekend of your training, and then it's too late. But to try and get that in, or the option there is just to put the biggest training weekend of your life in during the race. I mean, because you're going to be miserable twice otherwise. Is that, I don't know.
It's
that's
such
a one and done formula.
It is, but that's where you again like debate on when and where to put yourselves in those situations. Do I do it in training, or do I wait for race day?
Mm-hmm.
Because listen, people, like, if you're not prepared and you put yourself in a time crunch and you miss these runs because you're hurt or you're sick or you have family or stress, like, your race is just a day on the calendar that you picked. It doesn't mean that you've done everything to get to it that you should have done to put you in the best position to race the best. But the best thing you can do for yourself is to put yourself in the best situation you have for that one day on race day and see what you're capable of. Because one bad day, or one day coming in really, really fresh with pretty good fitness, you're going to be a lot better suited than having tried to string together 3 of those type days by doing in these extra long runs or extra long rides to make yourself feel ready. Because by the time you get to race day, you're so broken, you can't even do it. And so preparation looks so different for everybody in terms of what they can do and what they can handle and how they can adapt and just life. You know, like, again, like we talk about this all the time, like we pick a race and we act like, and then we picture our life under complete total control with no sickness and no injuries and no family and no work and no life stresses will ever come in. And then we have this, and so, you know, who cares about what else happens? I have to make it work, and I have to jump from, you know, a 10 mile to a 15 mile to a 20 mile because I have to. But then what happens is, again, like, you just continue to put your body into these stressful situations where it's going to break and it's going to break down, and your recovery is going to take forever. And that again, like, I think it's harder with athletes that don't look at things on like as a long-term journey because they're rushed. Because you never want to sacrifice short-term anything for long-term development and the opportunity to be successful and healthy and see sustained success for years. And people forget that. That doesn't end on race day. And they're just going to end up continuously chasing that broken version of themselves that feel like they never in training could their body. And again, I think that's the self-exploration part about the human body, is that it needs time to be able to adapt to specific stimulus over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's underrated.
It's underrated. Like I had an athlete who's doing Boston here in a few weeks, and we just now, and this is her second time doing Boston since we started working together, and she's qualified. Both years we've worked together, and the training has looked totally different. And she's just now getting up to like even close to mileage to where people would think is acceptable for qualifying or running a marathon. Like we just now, last week, she did her first 50-mile run week with me in preparation for Boston. And the last few years, I think we barely hit 40. It wasn't because 50 isn't better, but it was because 40 was better for her then because of what she can actually handle. Versus now and we've been 2 years, we've had a lead up and she hasn't been injured, so she can handle 50. Again, it's about appropriate load and allowing them to do this and setting them up for success to where you're not putting them at risk. And while that may be hard for them to understand, it's like it's showing that you care about them and their person, their long-term success. And then that's what matters the most. And so it wasn't that 15, like if I go down the list and look at these 6 athletes that I've got doing Boston, their weekly mileage this last week ranges from 43 all the way up to 69. It's not because 69 isn't the best, or 40 isn't the best, or more mileage isn't the best. It's all about what they can actually handle. You can't rush fitness. You can't rush durability. You can't rush preparation. You just are, or they aren't. And then you have to work with the best you have with what you have. You can't just be a person who's ready to run a 20-miler in training. It's like, and there's only certain levels of running duration that people can withstand either. And it's about meeting them where they are. And yeah, you got to be creative, but you don't ever sacrifice putting them at risk for the sake of yourself of just saying they got to get in a 20 miler.
Yeah, that seems, man, if we could just, I want to, because this has really resonated with me from a perspective of, when I started this sport, I was like 50, right? Almost 50 years old. I'd never done any of that stuff before. Never really. I did some mountain biking as a kid and never swam or ran. I'd been running maybe a few months or 5 months or something like that when I decided to do my first Ironman. And put on a lot of load that first year, and because it had to be done in a lot of ways, but I was also stubborn, and I'm doing an Ironman, man. That's what I'm doing. Next year, 1 year, I'm doing it. And I put in like insane amounts of training compared to what my body had been through for like 49 years. It's like, what the hell? Every day, just kind of sucking it up and getting back out there and sucking it up. Went up and I'd say had a pretty decent race, but the aftermath of that is what I hear about all the time. Is like people just don't have that motivation. You have depression, you're worn out, and I thought maybe at that point, that would be the end. And it took me months. I mean, maybe till April of the next year to actually kind of start doing things again. And I had a few good rides in May or something like that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm doing Louisville this year. And it was like 3 months away. 3 or 4 months. It was in August at the time. And so I just poured everything into it again. And I got to this point where, again, I didn't do the crazy long runs and the crazy long rides. But it was a lot of it was because I did have a sort of a general sense that I wanted to listen to myself, and going crazy with these long rides every weekend would have been like terrible. So I just, basically did the same thing again. But this time I kind of undertrained, and then I got done with Louisville, and I'm like, screw that, I'm done with this stuff, And I had the same postpartum kind of depression, and I was using the race as the carrot, as the diamond. I was like, that was all for me. And I wasn't really looking at anything in a long-term perspective. And, obviously, thankfully, you were around. And then shortly thereafter, we got serious a little more serious. I started learning more about it with this podcast, or the idea of doing the podcast. And, we just talked a lot about it, and I learned. And then things started changing. But I would say I'm still not acclimated to that theory 100%. It isn't that I don't believe it. It's just very hard to gauge it, and it's very hard to rein yourself in. And this might be the first time that I've trained for an Ironman. This will be my 7th year in a row, I think. Mm-hmm. And this is the first time that I feel like I have at least a beat on that, and have used fitness from the year before and carried it through, and been patient with it, and looked at my workouts in such a way that I have to keep progressing and not jump ahead of myself all the time and do these epic workouts that we all hear about. And it's kind of that just being satisfied with the best I am at the time.
I mean, it's like if we took the word training out of it, and it's like if you had a friend come up to you and they're like, hey man, like, I think I'm gonna ask this girl out, and you're like, dude, like you just got out of a relationship 8 hours ago. Do you think this is a good idea? Yeah, I'm ready for it. I'm totally over it. I'm prepared. Like I got this. Like you'd be like, no, dude, like this is dumb. Like this isn't a good idea. Or if you had a friend that was like, yeah, I did a couple 10 milers, but I missed the last few weeks, and I'm still dealing with this little niggle, this injury, and I'm getting better. I'm not well, I'm getting better, but my marathon's in 4 weeks, so I gotta get this 20 milers, so I'm gonna do it this weekend. What would you say? Besides, you're an idiot. That's what you would say. You're an idiot. Like, how does that make sense? Oh, but I have to do this 20 miler to be quote unquote prepared. So you make life about the race. You don't make your training life in the succession and the progression of yourself and like in your own specific athlete life cycle. You make it about just getting by from event to event to event, not gradual long-term progression. And so you would give hopefully, if you're a good friend, you would tell them that these are horrible ideas. But when it comes to yourself, you're like, I know myself better than anybody. I can definitely do this, or I need to do it for my sanity, or I need to do it for whatever. It's just not that. It's just not that way. And so when you look at like making up workouts or adding workouts, I think one of the most difficult things again for athletes to understand it is that coaching is stress management. That is your number one job. Stress management. Mm-hmm. How much do you add? How much can you add this week of stress? How much physical volume, intensity? How much can I distribute and add and load to appropriately give this person an opportunity to absorb this stress, grow from it, adapt, and then wake up next Monday prepared to again handle a little bit more stress? You only should give them what you think they can handle. So when things are added or things compounded and then you string things together, or you try and stack 3 workouts in a day because you missed one earlier in the week, you're negating the safety net per se that your coach has applied that gives you an opportunity to appropriately respond to stress and not have that stress absolutely beat you down. And it's just one of those things that I think people it blows my mind sometimes in training when if you look at people's lives and you look at the things they're going through and the amount of stress that people have with their life, like you come to a breaking point and you get sick, or you can't sleep, or you get depressed, or all these things happen. And like, I'm not even talking about training, I'm talking about life, with your career, with your relationships, with all these, other extenuating circumstances that life throws at you every single day. You have a dog that's sick, you have a job that you hate. All these things add up and are so stressful on you that you crumble. You get super sick, you get depressed, you feel isolated, you just crumble. That's just from emotional and mental stress. And it's the exact same thing when you talk about adding physical stress, that we do, and that's what training is. And so when you compound that with physical stress, you would never suggest to a person, hey, listen, man, you sound really stressed about your job, and I know it's eating at you, and I know it's crushing you, and you're putting in like 60 hours a week. Buddy, Mike, the best advice I can give you, pick up a part-time job. Add a little bit more,
yeah, no shit.
Hours, like, no, it's like that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So like when you reverse and you put it in that light, you're like, okay, now I sound like a complete utter idiot. I would never give someone that advice. But when it comes to training, because I think it wraps in so many different variables and your ego and fear and all these kind of things, you're like, man, like why am I stacking? Why am I adding? Why am I like this? I'm already on a thin line. I'm already kind of treading on that tightrope where a coach is pushing me, but it's the best comment a coach can give with any session is that felt appropriately challenging. To where I learned from it. And in order to grow, you have to be given the opportunity to learn and adapt, so you can therefore have the energy to continue to grow. Like you don't go out to your yard and you're like, what's great? I want my grass to grow. I'm going to set it on fire and start over. No. You think I'm going to overseed, I'm going to aerate, I'm going to do all these things, so I'm going to challenge my yard appropriately to respond when I want it to in spring, so I can crush every neighbor around me and have the greatest yard on the block. And you're not like, what sounds great? I'm going to put a lot of gas in, I'm going to light it up in flames, and I'm going to start over again. No, it's about appropriate stress and appropriate load. And so when you look at training and you look at making up workouts, or you miss Tuesday, so I'm going to add an extra bike to a Friday. Like, hello, alert, mayday, mayday, guess what? You missed Tuesday for a reason. You were too stressed or you were too tired, so what makes you think putting yourself right back in that situation is the best idea for you? And again, like, people think that coaches, like, the coach's number one job is to run interference, or is to provide these epic, unheard of workouts. No, it's to run life interference on you not being an idiot, and then setting you up to be. It's just allowing you to not be an idiot, and I will take the responsibility of you not being an idiot. But athletes can still be idiots for sure. But that's what it is.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can, and it's just like that's the struggle. But that is, for some reason, it's like one of the hardest concepts to. It's like I have to be ready, but you haven't prepared to be ready. And so the best thing you can do as an athlete is to accept that I am where I am, because who's going to be better? Who's going to be better on race day? A fitter and faster and much fresher person who's only run 16 miles, or a broken down soul who's crumbled and stumbled and walked their way through an 18 and a 20 mile prep run 2 weeks out before a marathon?
No.
I'll put my money every day on the fresher, fitter, faster 16 mile person to just do it one day when they're emotionally and mentally crisp and ready and feel good and feel confident, versus the broken down soul who just can't find a way. But hey, they made it to the finish. They made it to the start line, and they're there. And we talk about this too when it comes to those last few weeks before a big race, whether it's a 70.3 or an Ironman or an ultra event or whatever it is. Like, most times athletes start to crumble mentally and emotionally long before they do physically. And you want them to be crisp physically, emotionally, and mentally on race day. And you have to balance those stresses and those loads. And it's hard, but that's why you hopefully need someone to do things to help. Well, to help, like I said, hope you not be an idiot.
Yeah. Well, I think we've all had those runs where we maybe feel like we're a little behind in the 8 ball, and you kind of go out and you start running because you haven't run in a little while, but you've had sort of a pretty consistent past with running recently, and you go out and you start running and you're like, man, I feel excellent today. I'm supposed to run 8 miles or whatever. Say not 8 miles. Let's say 1 hour, and you're like about 30 minutes in when you should be turning around. You're like, I feel a lot better today than. So the next thing you know, you run out another 15 miles and your turnaround is 45 minutes instead of 30, and you're feeling pretty good still. But then again, then you get back to that, you got 30 minutes left and you start to crumble a little bit and you're starting to hurt. And then it becomes that run where we've all had them, where after you've run too far or too fast or whatever, you just feel terrible. Like, you just feel physically and mentally beat down. And then I think the example here is that if you're going to do, a long course race, a 70.3 or Ironman, with that same mentality, you can do it, but you can multiply that feeling by like 5 or 10, that crumbled feeling, and that's the whole point, I think, is that you have to go into these races with a logical perspective of what you're going to do. It's like, if you haven't done that, you can do it and you can probably push it and you can probably crush yourself, but it's going to pay. It's going to really show up afterwards, and it's going to show up for a long time, and it could be detrimental to your triathlon career. it's the truth of it, because I think we can all do it, and you can all get it in. And how many athletes have you seen that have started off with these big tri-calc goals in mind, and they kind of just start falling apart in the middle of training, and then they get to race day and they still kind of think they can do it, but then they just struggle big time at a full Ironman. I often think sometimes it's a good idea, if you're a tri-calc person, to go to tri-calc immediately after a terrible workout and then start putting your numbers in, because we all get false expectations and sort of lose reality, and then that can swirl into like a real big problem regarding your healthy lifestyle.
Well, and again, it's depending on what distance I mean, it's not even that much distance, unless it's like a sprint distance. It's about creating a durable, resilient body and accumulating things over time, as in 7 days a week, weeks and weeks and months together, not one off here, one off here. Oh, I'm back. Look at me. You just did like a 30-minute run at 7-minute pace, but you haven't worked out in 4 weeks. You're not back. That's just who you are right now, and you're not going to be anybody different in another month because you're going to be the exact same. Versus who. So this is the most difficult thing for some athletes to kind of wrap their mind around, in terms of, what does fitness and improvement look like? Does it look like a one-off? No. Does it look like I took off 3 weeks and I have a super fresh body and I just, did a super hard hour? That's just who you are and what you did today. It's one workout. What true fitness is seeing a person who normally goes out on like their zone 2 runs and averages like a 10-minute mile consistently, and give or take, because we all vary, or we should vary. So let's say the average between like 950s and 1020s for like, a 45, 50-minute, 60-minute zone 2 run, on the weekday. And they put together weeks and weeks and weeks, consistent training, missing just a very few workouts, staying healthy, not being sick. 3 months down the road, they go out for a run on a Wednesday, and they comment, and they're like, "Coach, I thought I was doing like 950s, and I looked down, and it was the easiest thing, and I was running 910s or 9 minutes or 850s." That's true fitness gains, because not only are they becoming more efficient, are they becoming fitter, in fact, they're doing it as they're becoming a more resilient person. So who would you rather take? Would you rather take the person who's running, 45, 50 miles, or 5 or 6, 7 hours of running a week spread out between 5, 6, or 7 runs a week, and they're averaging, a 10 to 10-10 pace? But they can do it all. They never miss a session. They're building on volume. They're building on intensity. They're building on, distance and duration. Or would you rather take the person who can do 15 miles a week, but they're averaging 8-minute miles? I'll take the more durable athlete who's going to break down later, because the drop they're going to see isn't going to be near as significant. And so again, you're looking for durability and ability to be resilient, because as I don't remember who said it the first, because it wasn't us, but we say it all the time. It's like 70.3 and especially a marathon or Ironman distance racing. It's not about how fast you go. It's about who slows down the least, because your speed work means nothing. Zero, nada, zilch, if you can't get to a point to where it matters, because speed the first half marathon means nothing if you don't have it at the end. And the same can be said for doing speed workouts. If you can't produce subsequent next day, next few days, additional workouts that are going to help spring forward and absorb and turn your fast into far. Because if you're too shelled from Track Tuesday to run for 4 days, then I'll easily trade you a 5 run day a week for 2 days, any day of the week. I would trade it every day for every athlete. And again, it's just about how you see things, how you filter things through it, and what's successful and what is fitness, and how you get there. And are you doing it in a way that is the healthiest and mitigates the most risk? Because again, stress management is risk management. It's the exact same thing. It's not setting your athletes up for failure, not putting them at risk, pushing them appropriately, giving them enough stress to where they bend and they grow, but they don't break. And as athletes, sometimes they love to break. They for whatever reason, they love to try and break themselves. Like that's a badge of honor or anything positive.
And fast is all relative, And these, like when you go out and track Tuesday, the thing, and it's like I wonder how many people have been injured on that kind of stuff too, you know. And it's like when you say, when you mention that first half marathon or the full marathon of an Ironman, for example, and it's who slows down the least. I mean, I've had like, you know, if you get, you know, towards the end of that bike and you really feel shelled, which a lot of people do, and you know that, you know, your best marathon is probably not in front of you at that point. I've often thought, and I just wanted to run this by you because, you know, everyone, and not everyone, but a huge chunk of people, including me, end up, you know, walking the aid stations. And I know I advocated before about not walking any of the marathon, and I kind of still feel like that way.
We still get hate mail for that one.
I know, but I've thought about this a lot, actually. Is like, I wonder if, because the bike is so traumatic, and it can be so traumatic for a lot of people, if maybe a strategy is not bad to come out thinking in terms of like walking a little in the beginning of your marathon and kind of letting your body settle back in, and you know you don't maybe have the fitness to drill a whole marathon that day or whatever, if that might not be a better strategy, because all of a sudden, you know, then you're if you're walking a little bit in the beginning, then the odds of you maybe not slowing down are better in the back.
I think it's more about, it's not so much about the walking. I think it's more so the preparation or kind of the reset of your internal speedometer. Yeah. You know, or that it's like I need to start this out very chill.
Yeah.
And I need to let my adrenaline and my endorphins and the getting off the bike buzz and the crowd and the energy, I need to let that simmer down to meet the actual feel of where I'm supposed to go.
Yeah.
Because that's the only time I'll ever give an athlete a pace, is the first 3 to 4 miles of an Ironman. I'll say, don't you dare go under 10:30 or 9:30 or 8:30 or whatever it is. And it's not a run this for the rest of the day. It's a self-governing cap that this I know you can run and it's going to feel super chill and super slow. Because if I say 10:30s, I know you're going to run 9s. but if I don't say it, you're going to run 8s. And so you're going to get yourself into like a lot of trouble. And so it's about, you know, discerning and deciphering, I guess, like allowing those feelings and that energy to dissipate, so you can actually get a true gauge of the control you're supposed to have for such a long rest of the day, which is the Ironman marathon, which is such a hard thing to nail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then we get this. How do you get this in your head that it's like, oh, now I just need to go out and run, and it's so long. Mm-hmm. It's such a long day, and if you forget that, next time you go out and run, and just think about how long it takes you just to run 1 mile. I mean, sometimes that first mile can seem, you know, like, and then add 25.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's this illusion that we have is like, okay, the relief of getting off the bike, and now it's just I need to go out and just lay it down. And I love what you say about all the energy dissipating and the recalibrating and all that kind of stuff, because I think that is massive. And it's one thing that I have definitely failed many times at. And it's very difficult. That's why I think I say, maybe not just walk like forever, but like throw in some walks, because it forces you to slow down. And, you know, if you're hitting tri-calc after some of your good runs and you think that you can run a 9-minute pace on Ironman marathon or whatever, I think you need to add at least a minute per mile, or probably 2 as your goal for those first 3 miles. Mm-hmm. At least 2 minutes, because it's back to that. I think the best example we've ever cited, or one of them, is that Will Emery, when he finished in the top 10 at Ironman Louisville overall, and we looked at his numbers, and his first 3 splits were 9:30s. And then he ran 23 straight miles at 7:30 after that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wasn't like he got his second wind for 23 miles. It was, and then back then too, to be fair, it was also about getting cool.
Yeah.
And like, because back then it was at Louisville and it was in August when it was just like, 100 degrees. It was more also about heat management. But again, it's, it's knowing your body and knowing what you need to do for the long term. And it's so funny, like, one of the best things you can probably do the first 3 miles of your marathon and Ironman is stop and shake hands and give hugs.
Yeah.
And not blaze out, like, barely can't look at you because, baby, I got a PR coming. And then, like, 4 miles later, you're going to have all the chance in the world to catch up while you sit on the curb and blow your load.
Mm-hmm.
Because you went out too fast. It's like, it's probably one of the best things you can do because you're so hyped and you're so pumped and, good God, your crotch is so happy to be off the bike. You feel like you can conquer the world. And then your speed goes and your heart rate gets up and then your core temperature rises and the crowd quiets and you get out to where it's lonely and you're like, yeah, those first couple miles are a bad idea.
Yeah.
And then it ain't so fun anymore. But yeah, it's learning those things and being responsible and owning where you are, and then respecting how much farther you have to go, and what you have to do to get there, and take that the kind of small analogy of like knowing how much farther you have to go and want to go. You're not going to run as fast as you can the first 6 miles just to show off your speed, knowing that you have to walk because you're still going to finish, but you are this speed and you're just going to run it, versus the athlete who's like, you know what, I have a long way to go. I need to pace this appropriately and listen to my body and know what I'm actually capable of today. I feel like I'm capable of running a 4-hour marathon. So what you're not going to do is start out in the first half running a 3-hour marathon pace. You're going to be responsible, hopefully, with the sound strategy that is built towards the long-term success that is finishing and running the end of the marathon. And that's how you should also approach your training and structuring it and looking at the misses and the failed runs, or the non-progression, because maybe the stress you applied for that hour and a half run, like, because I think sometimes we also forget that. And I get questions like this from athletes. It's like, hey, I had an hour and a half run last week. Why did I have an hour and a half run this week, like coming up? Why am I not bumping up in duration? And the best answer I can usually give is, well, the next day you were struggling big time, or you really faded at the end of the run. You were averaging 10-minute pace, and then you went to like 12:30 or 13. Like, we did it, but you weren't necessarily prepared to the extent that I would have liked you to be prepared, so you can continue to train this week. So what I'd like for you to do is be prepared to feel like it's appropriately challenging and I can keep going, versus, so you barely got through an hour and a half run and it was a struggle. So let's just do 145 because it makes sense. And like, you're not going to be 15 minutes more ready the next week. And so sometimes you have to work backwards and you just have to work with the reality that is show me your work. Like, what have you done? Where are you? What makes sense? And I don't care about the race that much. I mean, I care about making sure you're in the best place I can possibly get you to for the race, but I don't care about the race more than I care about you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think some athletes fail to understand sometimes. I'm not going to sacrifice or put you at risk for the sake of this ridiculous race. I'm just not.
That's like, let's just retake the quiz and make sure you got it down. It's like a calculus.
That's right. Yeah.
Calculus course that you're struggling on the quiz right before a big exam, and instead of going into that exam with a light understanding of an important concept, you go into the test and you take it and you're struggling, and all of a sudden you're behind the 8 ball for the rest of the semester because you didn't learn something that was crucial to moving forward. I think a big part of this too is that we all have a tendency to look at, I don't necessarily want to say elite athletes, but people that have prepared themselves for certain things, and look at that as a guiding post sometimes. And one of the examples I've always liked to use is, how they say there's this sort of thing in triathlon swimming, especially if it's a group start of some sort of the age group or a mass start or whatever. They always talk about swim hard out of the gate and find your space and then settle in. Would you agree that's a sort of a traditional concept in triathlon?
Mm-hmm.
So that's great, but they practice it a lot. You know what I mean? And you practice it. You try to practice it with some of the workouts. It's like get into the pool and go, get in there and get a little bit warm and then just go hard versus, hey, I need to get, because you're going to start that swim more amped and a lot faster than you think you are anyway. So that's why I'm such a big proponent of easing into each event. It's like the bike, the same thing happens. You get on the bike and I'm cruising, I'm trying to get my nutrition in and taking it a little bit easy, and there's dudes just hammering down right out of the gate. The first half mile, you hear those disc wheels just flying by me, and I'm like, man, I know I'm going to have a lot better race if I just kind of take it easy for the first 20 miles. And, that doesn't mean, not race, but it does mean let your body recalibrate, and I like that word, dissipate. Let the other event get out of you a little bit, and it's just sort of like jumping out of bed and going right to a meeting or something. You need a little time to kind of get your brain straight and your body and everything. So
yeah, that's why it's like the same thing of like, don't make any big decisions when you're really pissed off or you're super happy, because your view is totally skewed.
Mm-hmm.
But people do it all the time. They make horrible, life-altering decisions when they're super upset, or they're super down, or they're super mad, or when they feel like today's the greatest thing. Like today, I got a promotion, I got a job promotion, I'm getting a raise. You know what? I'm getting a new car. Mm-hmm. It's like, whoa! That your raise is good and your job promotion is good. It's a reflection of how great you're doing at work. But this doesn't mean it's a good excuse. Or, man, things are going. You know what? I'm going to ask her to marry me. You've been going out for like 2 weeks, bro. Like, don't make decisions like when you're on those ends of the spectrum. But people don't apply that to training and during a race either. But just be wary, and you can never ask yourself too many times, is this a good idea? Is this a good idea? Is this a good idea? And if it is a good idea, why is it a good idea? Because by the time, usually, even if you haven't figured out an answer yet, most oftentimes that impulse is gone. And you're like, you know what? I don't know the answer. I don't even need to know. It's like you're like moving on.
Mm-hmm.
So don't make impulse decisions. Try to be smart. Treat yourself well. Be kind to yourself, and think of your long-term development and how you can be the most successful in the long term, and what that looks like. And are you really ready to sacrifice this half marathon or this marathon or this race where you have a niggling injury? Like, is it really worth it to you to be on the shelf for months or who knows how long? It's just to be objective and treat yourself kindly and try to make the best decisions that you can.
Okay. That sounds good to me. That is going to wrap it up.
That'll wrap it up. Crushing Iron Podcast, episode 247.
Yeah. At least 255 in the can.
Every Monday and Thursday. We appreciate you joining us. We appreciate the reviews you've gotten the last few days. Thanks for taking the time to do that. Please subscribe. We will see you on Thursday. We got a squad cast coming out too. Those will be returning. And if you want more info on all the other things that we do and what it's like to be involved in our community, you can go to crushingiron.com, and that's got more info on our club, the athletes that we coach, training and coaching packages, swim analysis, our triathlon camps, everything. You can go there. Again, it's crushingiron.com. If you got a question for Mike specifically, crushingiron@gmail.com. And if you want to reach out to me directly, door is always open. You can email me at c26coach@gmail.com.
All right. Thanks a lot, buddy. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too, bud. See you.
See you.